the science.
Suffice it that the blood of 1,000 men and women was spilled within these walls. Limbs twisted and broken, eyes gouged from bloody sockets, flesh burned black.
Please. You're away from dead. In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes. But you have to realize that we're all just a mouse that a cat has by the tail.
The number you have reached, 911, has been changed to a non-published number.
What's up, guys?
Hey everybody, this is Trent Lackey.
And this is Jay Scott. You're listening to World of the Unexplained. Tonight we've got Nigel Suckling with us from the UK. He's written quite a few books, actually, done some different things. The books we're talking about tonight, Trent, are...
Vampires, Werewolves, and Witches. It's 3 different books.
Yeah. So it should be some fun. I mean, he's done a lot of work before in a lot of different avenues. His website's just a ton of information. You can check that out. I don't have the address in front of me.
It's www.unicorngarden.com.
Okay, unicorngarden.com. It's also on our website. Anyway, without further ado, I guess we'll bring him on. This is Nigel Suckling. Nigel, how are you?
Oh, fine, thanks.
Great.
Welcome to the show, Nigel.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's probably pretty late your time out there, isn't it?
It's about 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, okay.
Oh, great. All right.
Well, hopefully we didn't...
No, I'm usually up this time anyway, actually.
Oh, okay, good. Do you write late at night usually?
Quite often, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I don't know. Let's begin at the beginning. How about that?
Sounds good to me.
Tell us a little bit about your beginnings and how you chose this path that you are on now.
Beginnings were just writing out of curiosity about weird and wonderful things, and then I got to interview artists for books of their work. Some famous artists like Boris Vallejo, Rodney Matthews, and that kind of led into writing about things like unicorns and eventually leprechauns and any sort of strange and wonderful thing that comes along, really.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We're
I'm adjusting the level. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, and the website also. Did you put this together yourself? It's pretty interesting and very colorful and very thematically the same thing. I noticed lots of unicorns, lots of mythical sorts of creatures. Did you design this yourself?
Sure, yes. I started by trying to sort of persuade friends to design one for me, but none of them would rise to that. So I kind of got a book on HTML and learned to do it myself.
Oh my gosh, that's a pain. Let me tell you, we do our own stuff here on our show, and it's a real pain in the butt sometimes. So tell us, when is this new book coming? This new series of books coming out? Vampires.
Halloween. They're aimed for, or probably just a bit before.
Okay,
That's
very
kind of the theme of it. Well, werewolves, witches, and vampires. Sort of a Halloween theme.
Okay, very cool.
Is this your first delving into this region?
Pretty much. I've been writing about vampires for ages, but nothing's actually been published except on my website. And I get all kinds of inquiries about them, but this is the first chance I've had to sort of write about dark stuff, because usually I do bright stuff, more cheerful things.
Yeah, we noticed that on the site. Well, what can you tell us about vampires? Let's start there. We'll start at the beginning, I guess.
Vampires. Yeah, that's kind of my starting point. I mean, basically, I was just interested in them. And when my publisher said, "What do you want to write about?" I said, "Well, vampires and werewolves."
Huh.
And he was the one who said, "Well, why not make it trilogy and do witches as well?" So vampires. Well, the starting point was Dracula. And curiosity about where it all came from.
Mm-hmm.
So, from vampires you go, well, sort of the background that Bram Stoker had. That was kind of my key. Was I was looking at Bram Stoker and thinking, well, what did he get? Where did he get his ideas? And then from the sort of literature that was around, there's a kind of historical backgrounds and, going back really quite a long way. And then also contemporary things about how people think about vampires today and to what extent they're real,
Mm-hmm. What did your research uncover?
Well, a surprising number of people take it seriously still today. I mean, look, for most people it's just a myth and a creepy sort of horror thing, but a surprising number of people take it seriously, and some of them, well, most of them are very nice people, and the number of people have had contact me through vampires, almost all of them are the most pleasant people imaginable.
Oh, well, that's good.
That's comforting.
I think I've had one or two strange emails from people who I wouldn't really want to meet, but that's a tiny proportion of the number of people I have met.
So did you, when you researched these, did you go by some of the ancient folklore? Did you dive into the Lord Ruthven work, maybe the John Paul Adair work?
Barney the Vampire?
Yeah, Thomas Prescott?
Oh, yes, absolutely, yes. And Montague Summers, he's a great writer for the folklore, He's just full of just fascinating stuff.
Yeah. I think Summers wrote a lot of books, actually. He did some on witchcraft, and I don't know if he
werewolves.
covered... Okay. I didn't know if he covered the werewolf. I'm trying to remember. I've read some of his stuff. It's pretty old stuff, actually. And it's really good if you can take a modern approach and distill it down a little bit, because to go through those volumes, Trent knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah,
and I know you do now too. it's quite a chore.
It's an entertaining chore, but sometimes people may not have the time really to delve into it like
heavy
we did.
Going, it's true, but I mean it's kind of an interesting challenge. I had a job a few years ago, it's about 10 years ago, of editing one of his books just to make it readable. And actually, it was quite an easy job. You just drop out large chunks.
Oh yeah.
He's actually got quite a clear structure, and he can write quite well. But he gets digressions all the time. He gets carried away with strange digressions. And he writes in different languages as well, which is quite confusing.
Oh yeah, it certainly is.
What do you now? You're in the UK, right?
Yeah.
Are you near London or?
Yeah. Just south of London. Yeah, between London and the south coast.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the Highgate vampire story?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Wasn't Bishop of Sheffield? Is he?
I'm sorry?
I'm trying to think of the guy who was involved in that.
Sean Manchester.
Yeah.
And David Ferrant.
Yeah, vaguely, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we were wondering. We've got David coming on our show, and we've been bombarded by emails from the Vampire Research Society.
That's Manchester's website.
That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're giving him what we call the Woe-To Challenge.
Really?
Yeah.
He hasn't given an interview, I don't believe, since 2003 or 2001.
I believe, yeah.
So we've given him the challenge. If he wants to send us email and all that stuff, he can come on the show and tell his side of the story, which we would really look forward to.
Oh, absolutely.
What do you make of the Highgate stuff?
I'm not sort of enormously clued up on it, but there's obviously something going on there, and he's quite interesting. He's quite an interesting character, Manchester.
Oh yeah.
But I haven't had any direct contact with him. I did get talking to someone. Well, one of his enemies, actually, so my viewers in this and this guy warned me off him, but I don't know more about him than that, really.
Well, so he has more than one.
Oh,
apparently.
yeah,
He has quite a few enemies, yeah.
Yeah, oh, well.
Well, the reason I mentioned that is because A, we've been getting a lot of email from them, and B, also we've he claims to be a student, a modern day student of the late Montague Summers, and so we found that kind of an interesting, parallel.
Yeah. I have an open mind about him. Mm-hmm. I've seen stuff he's written on the internet, and I keep an open mind,
Right.
So do you mention the Highgate affair in your current vampire book, or?
Well, not really, except in passing, as along with New Orleans before the hurricane. It's still a place, still a creepy place. It's quite a few years since I've been up there, but it gets creepy at night,
Oh yeah.
No, I imagine so. And I'm assuming you've also delved into research with Vlad Tepes, and
Oh yes, absolutely.
of course.
Yeah.
Would you say this book is more like a an in-depth detail thing of vampires, or is it?
It's quite a strange format because this is sort of dictated by the publisher that he likes things quick, so they have to be cut down to. It's called sort of the vampires, facts, figures, and fun, all of them,
Right.
which is quite strange given the subject. So it's quite in small snippets, digestible, small chunks. So it's less lengthy than I usually write.
Right.
It's much more condensed than I usually write. So hopefully there's quite a few facts that people will not have come across.
Okay.
But it's digestible. It's a fairly short book, 100 pages each of them.
Okay.
No, okay. Well, that's great, actually.
Yeah, I guess you could say. I mean, in a way, would it be something that someone doesn't? If someone didn't know about these topics, they would pick it up and.
That's kind of the thing, and I hope it goes in. They all go into in more detail than you get in most. But it is an introduction, yeah.
Okay.
But with hopefully a bit of depth as well.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, what all did you as far as that we've got the vampire thing, we've got the werewolf thing. Why witches? Is that something that was a publisher's idea?
It was a publisher's idea, yeah, to make the trilogy, but it's a slightly different subject, of course, because most witches are perfectly decent, and always have been.
Yeah.
Lovely people. So to bracket them together was a bit weird. In fact, in the witches book, most of the sort of witches, most of the villains are the witch hunters more than the witches themselves.
Now, did you use the Malleus Maleficarium?
Absolutely.
Okay. Wow, you can't believe I know as much about this as I do, can you? Okay. We've been doing this a while.
Yeah.
But that was another Summers novel. Actually, I've actually got a copy of that. Believe it or not.
I mean, that cat wrote a lot of books about this stuff.
Oh yeah.
But
it was basically like a witch hunter's guide, though, to destroying the evil.
Yeah, that's right. It was written, I can't remember, 16th century or something, by two German guys, and Summers did this brilliant translation of it. Yes, it's sort of, if you want to know about what people thought about witches, it's good. But I mean, how much it tells you about the actual witches is, of course, debatable.
oh, God, well, certainly.
What do you think How do you think people in Europe, in general, England included, relate to these stories versus people maybe over here in America?
I'm not sure how different it is. There's, with regard to witches.
Oh, with regard to vampires, werewolves, the older, more European-based.
I suspect it's very similar to over there in the States. It's not. I don't think there's an enormous difference across the Atlantic in how they're viewed. There's possibly less hostility towards like witches, modern witches, over here, because there's sort of less fundamental Christianity going on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that
makes sense. Yeah.
But apart from that, I can't really think of a vast difference in attitude towards, especially vampires and werewolves. They're kind of viewed pretty much the same.
I was just wondering because you have so many of those legends spring from the the European, the ancient European kind of
the European traditions is basically where we get our legends from. I mean, I'm assuming they're Native American myths along the same ways, like especially with like the Wendigo and I can't really think of a good Native American vampire myth, but certainly.
I think they had. Well, I suppose like with werewolves, they had equivalent of jaguars and kind of similar. They're people, they're were-jaguars rather than werewolves. But
that's
less
right.
hostility towards wolves in North America.
Oh yeah.
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 They're more of a.
Well, let me give the numbers here.
Oh yeah, that's right, Scott.
It's 800-960-2289. That's 800-960-2289. You can call in, speak with author Nigel Suckling here, or locally 336-996-1596. We're taking your calls. Nigel, tell us more about the vampire book. I want to stay on this for a while since we've got so much time before moving on to some of the other things. What was your biggest challenge in writing this book?
Well, I've started a book about vampires about 8-9 years ago, which is kind of a baby I've been carrying for ages. So this is kind of a much more condensed version, and the challenge was not to repeat too much, which is in my other book, if this one goes down well, there's a much larger book on vampires, which I hope we'll be able to follow.
Uh-huh.
So I was kind of, the challenge was to get lots of interesting things in it, but without sort of just robbing the bigger book, and cheating a bit, really. So I sort of branched out a bit to try and find stuff I hadn't put in the other book.
So you're actually in the works right now as a bigger volume you plan to release later?
Yes, that's right. That's the hope. And so I hope this is more than a taster. The big challenge was actually to get, condense it to the format of this book, because, especially with Bram Stoker, it would have been nice to say a lot more about him.
Mm-hmm.
But I pass over him in a few paragraphs. But he was a really interesting guy.
Oh, yeah.
And quite a worthy sort of topic in himself. So the main challenge was to condense stuff and get stories down to a few paragraphs, which really deserve to have pages and pages.
Oh, absolutely. So as an author, you write about these sort of things, and you say you have an open mind. Would that mean that I'm not going to try to pigeonhole you in one way or another, but I mean, has there ever been a time when you're writing about things that you say, man, there's really something to this, and I really believe, or do you just keep being very objective and just basically let the readers decide what they want to believe?
I'm kind of inclined more from the angle of belief. I tend to believe these things, but I hold a reserve of skepticism just in case,
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not quite completely objective, but I suppose close to half objective, and the other half I just sort of follow. Because I quite like all these things to be true, like unicorns and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
In a different world, they would all be true, so I kind of, indulge that a bit. And wherever possible, and, you can say that, well, these people were vampires, as far as you can tell. There's some really great stories from Eastern Europe in the 18th century. Very weird stories where, to all intents and purposes, vampirism was a plague there. And they've got all these soldiers investigating it. There's no big axe to grind, but they appear to find it true. Well, that's fascinating. Yeah. So I tend to sort of look for things that would prove the truth of the phenomenon.
Oh, okay.
Now, are you speaking of like the Peter Plajogowicz and some of these other cases?
Yeah, that's right. And Arnold Powell. And
oh, yeah. There's a great book out. I don't know if you've read it. I'm sure you probably have come across it, and you probably did use it for some of your research. It's a book by Paul Barber. It's called Vampires, Burial, and Death, I believe. I don't think
I've seen that one, no.
I think it's out of print. Yeah, it's a really... He was a UCLA professor, and he goes into detail, forensic... He's a forensic scientist. He goes into detail about the Plajogowicz and some of the other variations. And what's so amazing is he tells us basically how a lot of these things can be explained away by modern forensic science. For example, the face of the corpse, being all bloated and everything, he explains as the gases that the body produces after death. When they stake these corpses, and they see all this blood explode. It's just the moans they hear from a gas release. There's all kinds of stuff that he really goes into forensically. And this was written, I think, what Trent, in the 80s?
Yeah, it was. It's not too long ago.
Yeah, but you should check that out. It's Paul Barber. It's a really good book, actually.
Yeah, that sounds really great. And I like the things about them screeching. It's a fairly natural phenomenon. If you're trying to stake a supposed vampire, in quite a few accounts, they scream,
Yeah.
But that's a natural consequence of the air being forced out of the chest, So yeah, I believe in that. I'd love to read that book, yeah.
Well, let's go back. I'm just kind of interested about this, but you mentioned it, Scott, but this, when you're talking about this plague in Eastern Europe, I mean, could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Well, it was kind of what started the interest in vampires all over Europe. But 18th century, well, there were things like consumption. A lot of it can be explained by a plague of consumption.
Tuberculosis.
Like a real plague as opposed to like a vampiric plague.
You got also mixed up with ideas of vampires which were already prevailing. And a lot of it, these people rising from the grave was because they were buried before they were properly dead, you know?
Oh, yeah.
But for most of that, there are natural explanations other than vampirism for what happened there.
Oh, interesting. I'm sorry, there was seems to be a question on the chat room. Scott will get that.
Okay. In the Book of the Vampire, you seem to spend a lot of time going over historical mythos and literary significance of the vampire. Do you believe that vampires really exist, or do you attribute them to an ongoing urban legend?
It's tricky, because in a way you could say vampires exist now, because there are quite a few people around who believe they have to drink blood to... Well, they certainly get a thrill out of drinking blood, and some of them believe that they have to drink blood. There's no question that with most of the modern vampires that it actually gives them immortality. It's just that it gives them a sort of buzz. You could say, well, if they believe they have a compulsion to drink blood and believe they can't survive without it, then... well, that's quite a significant thing, because the idea of vampires then suddenly becomes very real. As far as I know, not many of these people actually go out and sort of murder people for the sake of their blood, but there's sort of quite, especially over there in sort of New York area and New Jersey, there's...
we wouldn't miss them then.
There's quite a subculture, isn't there, of vampirism?
Yeah, we...
volunteers and stuff.
Or pretend vampires, you know, they
want to be. We wouldn't miss them. We don't. There's over 12 million people in New York. We wouldn't know.
You know, the other thing is, and we do talk a lot about vampires. It's just one of our particular interests in this format that we have. But
very popular among our listeners, actually.
Yeah, but some of our other guests and Scott and I both have these sort of theories about the vampire, where you have Theory A or Form A of the vampire, which is the cultured, polished, sophisticated, psychotic, blood-letting monster.
Beautiful monster, you know, like the Dracula.
Yeah, beautiful monster.
The Stoker, the Lord Ruthven of
the man that is basically more than a man and drinks blood to sustain his immortal life. That's Form A of the vampire.
The Hollywood vampire.
Yeah. Sure. And then you have the other version of the vampire, which is basically like I said, a psychotic, bloodletting monster. You know, that's human only in the vaguest sense of the word, and
doesn't look anything like a normal human being.
That looks like some kind of horrific beast, I guess, or
more like a demon, a monster.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess without going too far, I mean, in your book and maybe personally, I mean, where do you
draw the line? How would you? Yeah. How do you correlate those?
Yeah, what do you...
I see. They're sort of side by side. They are two sort of separate things. Like in Anne Rice's interview with a vampire, there's quite an interesting bit where she goes off. Well, they go off to Eastern Europe, and all they find are these shambling monsters that go around savaging people, and nothing like the vampires of the glamorous ones.
Yeah.
And then they go off to Paris, and they meet some of the more sophisticated ones.
And we all know that's not true. Sorry, I had to go.
Scott. Go on, anyway. Nigel. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. It's, I suppose there's lots of different strands to it, like because the goat sucker thing from the 90s, it's also a vampire thing, you know. It's but that's a completely different kind of vampire. It's at most a sort of animal kind of vampire. They're all different strands which kind of go around each other, but they are slightly separate. The glamorous vampire is kind of a fictional thing, although it does go back to ancient sort of Greek and Roman kind of, and Arabic sort of seductive vampires. There's a bit of sort of, that's kind of fed into the myth of the seductress, you know, or the seducer, with the glamour and yet the danger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know that
there's lots of different strands all bundled together. Overlapping, but you know, there's something. What they have in common is that the sort of bloodlust and the urge to sort of get strength through taking someone else's blood. That's what they actually have in common. But there's several different kinds of vampires all sort of running in parallel.
I know that Montague Summers mentioned you were talking earlier actually about the different places, the Greek stuff. I think it's Impusa, if I'm thinking about
that. Yeah. And Lamia.
Yeah. And that was actually even mentioned in one of Shakespeare's works, according to one of Summers' translations. And I can't remember exactly which Shakespeare. Yeah,
I wouldn't know. I mean, I know a few Shakespeare, but
I actually got out with my English degree without ever taking a Shakespeare class.
Really?
Can you believe that?
That's insane.
I planned that well. I had to take this Chaucer class. It was the Middle English class was terrible, but it was well worth it.
Shakespeare is good, man.
Yeah. Well.
Anyway, I'm sorry. What?
We're yeah. Anyway, we go off sometimes.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
But let me give those numbers again here. We got about 3 minutes before we take our first break. Those numbers are 800-960-2289. That's 800-960-2289. Or locally 336-996-1596. You can go to the website, worldoftheunexplained.com, or omnisoundradio1.net. Click on chat, come into the chat room, make up a name. It takes just, about 3 seconds to register. And we've got a few people in chat right now. If you don't want to call in, you can ask your question of Nigel in the chat room, and we'll be more than happy to relate it to him. He won't bite, from what I understand, even though his book may. Or the people in his book may.
Yeah.
Well,
you kind of caught me off guard, Scott.
I'm sorry about that.
I'm trying to... So then, do you I'm assuming then you do cover the Greek and Roman mythos of the vampire.
Oh yeah,
as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, because and in fact, in the Witch's book as well, the Greek myth is kind of at the basis of it. So that's kind of where I start. I start off as far back as possible, and then sort of come forward and see how it's developed. Right up to the modern day. Really, that's the aim.
Okay. Yeah, actually, the only Greek myth I know about is the werewolf one. Actually, I'm not too familiar with.
Lycaon. Yeah, yes, that's right.
Something about a guy that savages sheep or something. He kills them and he has a knife wound. I can't. Anyway, sorry.
Did you come across when you were doing your research on the vampires, the Croglan Grange episode? Did you come across that?
I'm not sure. Tell me more.
I'm trying to remember myself. It's been a few years since I've read it, but
it's ringing some bell, but I can't immediately think of it.
It was a story. It happened somewhere in Europe, I believe, and somewhere in the UK.
Yeah, Croglan Grange. That sounds.
Yeah, it was
Irish.
Oh
yeah.
Well, maybe it was in Ireland. I don't.
Yeah.
UK. It's all the same, right?
No.
I'm gonna piss everybody off tonight. I'm on a roll.
Yeah.
Someone just popped in the chat room. Slaps at New Yorkers in French within 5 minutes of each other. You're on a roll. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Anyway, yeah, I'm not sure exactly where it was, but somewhere in Europe. Basically a young girl and her family had moved into some kind of cottage.
Is this the one where she sees the face in the window?
Yeah, and it's like clawing at the window every night, and then basically they chase it. I think her brother chases it and shoots it in the leg with a rifle, and he's like limping over this fence to get away. And does that ring any bells, Nigel?
No, not really. No.
Okay.
You haven't come across that.
Huh. Okay. Huh. We're gonna have to take a break real quick. I've got one more question that I'm dying to ask here, but we're gonna ask it as soon as we get back from the break. You guys are listening to World of the Unexplained live on the Omnisound Radio 1 network. Give us a call or jump into the chat room, and we'll be back in about 5.5 minutes.
See you then.
You're listening to the Omnisound Radio 1 network, bringing you the apocalypse with a twist of lime. www.omnisoundradio1.net.
And we're back.
We're back on World of the Unexplained.
Nigel, you with us?
Yep.
All right, great. Okay, now, let me give the numbers real quick. 800-960-2289. That's 800-960-2289. You can find them on worldoftheunexplained.com, or you can give us a call locally, 336-996-1596. Call in and speak with author Nigel Suckling. What was I going to say, Trent? I had this burning question that I was going to ask before the break, and now I think I forgot.
You did, actually, and you didn't tell me, so I don't know it.
Great.
I can't read your mind, Scott.
I know. I wish you could in this instance because it was a good question. Oh well. Okay. Well, let's wrap up. I guess we'll move along from the vampire thing then, unless we get some callers that want to talk about it.
That's true, and then you can still talk about it.
It doesn't matter. We'll pop in and out here. So tell us about the Werewolf Book.
Werewolves, they're quite closely related to vampires. I mean, in Greece they have the same word for them.
Oh.
Like in Dracula, he has wolves floating around. And in Greece they reckon a werewolf will become a vampire after death. So they're kind of first cousins. That's kind of the starting point. And there are lots of accounts of werewolves in France during the sort of witch hunts. They were also quite closely related to witches. And there's something like 30,000 people were burnt in France over 100 years for being either witches or werewolves. Mm-hmm. And there's some really graphic accounts of cases where even the witnesses sort of thought that they were looking at a wolf. It's quite a strange thing. On the whole, the werewolves thought they would become wolves, and didn't appear to other people. But occasionally, their sort of victims, or lucky victims who escaped, would describe them as behaving like a wolf. I suppose because of their manner and their sort of created the illusion that they had actually changed into the shape of a wolf. So in some ways, they're a more real phenomenon than vampires as we think of them. Although it tends to be more behaviour than actual physical change, as it happens in the movies.
Well, that's interesting. What do you think the idea of the silver came from in the whole werewolf?
That's a good question, because there was a famous case in France of the Beast of Gévaudan, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't they make
a silver bullet in the end? It's not just an invention of Hollywood, which lots of people think.
Yeah. Didn't they make a movie about that though, like based on the true events?
Yeah.
Brotherhood of the Wolf.
Brotherhood of the Wolf.
Was that it?
I think that was based off of that event.
What did you think about that?
Silver bullet. So there's some tradition then of it, of having to use a silver bullet to kill the thing. And it was some kind of monster, but they've lost the body, unfortunately. When they killed the thing, they stuffed it. And it was a really strange beast. And they took it on a tour around France and up to Paris. And then probably started falling apart, and they buried it somewhere, but no one knows where. So we don't actually know what kind of creature it was.
Yeah.
It wasn't an ordinary wolf, but a wolf-like sort of creature, but no one's quite sure what exactly the thing was.
Oh, there's a lot of reports about that too that were written in that point in time.
Sorry?
I'm sorry. There were a lot of actual written records of that incident too.
Yes, that's right. It's very closely documented. It led them a chase for several years. And was apparently shot several times. I think this is probably where the idea of the bullet gained strength, because it was apparently shot a few times and then went out of action for a while, and then a couple of months later be back out killing people. I can't remember how many people are supposed to have killed, but I mean a serious number, sort of 50, 100, something like that.
Huh. Wow, that's quite a bit. So what's your take on this? Well, I mean, what do you think? What is your belief system, your belief structure there as regards to that?
Well, I do think it's a wolf-like animal rather than a werewolf as such. I don't know why it's uncanny in some sort of way, but I think it was some sort of strange, monstrous, gigantic wolf or cross between a wolf and who knows what. So it's kind of one of those parallel things. It's not like the main werewolf phenomenon, which is, of course, people feeling they're turning into a wolf. But it still happens today. There's a few records in there within the last 10 or 20 years, psychiatric reports on people who feel themselves taken, possessed by this urge to become and feel they're turning into a wolf, but of course they just behave strangely. Well, that was quite interesting, sort of, digging out some of those cases and putting them in the book.
That's, actually, I remember, speaking of psychiatric reports, for some reason I remember a thing on TV a number of years ago, and it actually happened in Britain, and it was about a man who, all of a sudden, he seemed like a regular, like, blue-collar sort of a guy that worked every day. And then he, during the full moon, he experienced these weird situations and hallucinations, and it got very nasty. And, he apparently showed this tremendous amount of strength where he fought off several policemen, and then they put him away. So do you think that would also attribute to the werewolf myth? I mean, they don't change into werewolves, but yet they
I think that's
very
exactly.
savage.
I think werewolfism is a real phenomenon, but I mean a psychological one mostly. But it's a very real thing. It affects people, all over the world, really. So, well, in Africa they had leopard men. Like I was saying, each culture had its own. So in Africa, they haven't really got wolves. Same thing would happen with leopard men and, I suppose hyenas and wild dogs. When people felt themselves turning into like their totem animal,
Right.
would behave like that,
Yeah, that's true. I actually, I'm trying to remember. They even have shapeshifter legends in Polynesia, I want to say, and it's really bizarre. It's the most bizarre form of the shapeshifter legend, but like a weird shark, I think, where they, yeah, I can't remember what they're called, Rokea or something like that, but yeah, I remember each culture does have a sort of the same kind of story, and with that being said, it seems that it's some sort of a human phenomenon, because over many cultures, over vast distances, you have the same repeated kind of story of an animal of a person that shifts into an animal form, although the animal is different, but yet the same kind of patterns
I think it's
show
a
up.
universal thing. It's that sort of shamanistic kind of thing. The werewolf and leopard men thing is, I suppose, turning into a hostile animal, which then attacks people. That's kind of what the werewolf phenomenon really is. That it turns on humanity rather than, because the shaman enter into all sorts of shapes. But usually it's for a helpful reason. They want to help with the hunting or the whatever else. But the werewolf thing, well, the Scandinavians used to do it deliberately. The Norse berserkers. They used to either bear skins or wolf skins. They used to encourage the sort of the kind of werewolf mania deliberately to go into battle, and that's spread a lot of hostility towards wolves, actually, because lots of the chroniclers just used to call Vikings wolves. So they'd say, these 100 wolves attacked this town and killed everyone, and 100 years later they read that, but not realizing it referred to actual people dressed up in wolf skins attacking. They sort of put it down to the savagery of natural wolves, and it's part of what helped lead to the demonization of the natural wolf.
Certainly. And
what do you think about the disease, the human disease with porphyria, something like that? Porphyria, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. Or the human disease where the people grow hair all over their face and their bodies. Do you think maybe that in ancient, or not in ancient times, but in the earlier days may have caused people to believe more in this human werebeast?
I think porphyria is definitely one of the diseases that gets mistaken for vampirism. I suppose because they're vaguely related, that it could lead to sort of werewolfism. But
maybe I'm
it's one of the common things for gets led to the vampire legend.
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, no, I know lycanthropy. I know that. Well, no, the disease. I thought that was a disease.
Yeah,
the porphyria. I guess that's the whiteness.
Yeah, it's a blood
what's the disease with
the
what's the disease with the hair? I guess I got my terms mixed up.
Something like that.
Okay.
Hypertrichosis.
That's okay. That might where you grow hair all over your face and your whole
Yeah.
body. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Oh,
why
right,
I
yeah.
brought that term out.
Apparently, there's like a family in Latin America who have this disease. It's a genetic disease, and like the father and the son have it, and they're like,
Circus.
they're circus performers, basically. But I mean, that's the modern case of it. But
that's the family that work in circuses. And in the 19th century, there was a Russian guy who actually gave the image to werewolves in movies. He and his son both had this condition, and then his son became the Wolfman in Barnum Circus and travelled around the States and, well, all over the place, really. And definitely Hollywood then took his image for the Wolfman movies.
Huh.
And it also definitely adds credence in the old days, when people had this condition that they, wow, that guy looks like a hairy animal, so he obviously must be some sort of shape-shifting whatever. What kind of research did you do on this? I mean, anything in particular, literature-wise, or is it basically just looking up old historical accounts?
Well, actually, with hypertrichosis, it started with just having to catch a program about those circus performers, and sort of led back from there. There was a famous, in Europe, 16th century, I think it was, the King of France, Canary Islands. This guy was born with that condition, and the King of France invited him to court, and he and his children, daughter and son, all had this condition, and there's some famous paintings of them because they became a great phenomenon. They're the most famous case, which probably on record. There's some beautiful paintings of them.
Are you familiar with the Beast of Bray Road, what we have here in North America?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I spoke to... we went into that. I spoke to the reporter who was mainly responsible for that story.
Oh.
And she gets a link in the book.
Oh, okay.
She gave me some quite interesting stuff.
We have the author of the Beast of Bray Road book actually coming on our show.
The lady, is it?
Yeah, it's Godfrey.
Yeah, I think it...
Linda Godfrey, Linda S. Godfrey.
Yeah, I believe that's
I think she's the one I sort of emailed about it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. She's it's a very interesting book, actually. I was quite impressed. You never think of, when you think of werewolves and lycanthropy and things like that, you think of Europe. I mean, or at least I do. I don't think of North America.
It's a pretty standard. Well, the same thing with vampires too.
Oh yeah, you think of the old, the age-old stuff.
Eastern Europe, somewhere, crumbling castle on top of.
Yeah, when we think old over here, we're thinking back 1700 something. When you guys think old over there, you're thinking back a lot longer. But it's just something that when you think of the North America, you may think of the Bigfoot. The Yeti, that kind of thing. I throw those terms around mutually. I don't know if they're exclusive or not. Yeti and Bigfoot, I use them as synonyms.
I mean, you talked about... Well, we had Lauren Coleman on.
Yeah, I just throw them around.
I think it's a different species.
It probably is. I don't know.
And I guess that leads up you... I'm sorry. The werewolf, as it is, you believe is probably more of an animal, and the more psychotic aspects of humans, or you sort of combine those two, and of a large wolf-like creature, and someone who acts nuts on command, basically, and that sort of as the conglomerate becomes what we know of as the werewolf. Is that where you take it, Nigel? Yeah,
pretty much. I think. Sorry, you went very faint in my phone here. I'm just wondering whether to change my phone.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we'll maybe we'll tweak.
Try another phone here. Hello?
Okay, yeah, we're here.
Can you hear us?
Better, yes.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay, good.
Yeah, sorry, you were almost out of hearing. Sorry, what was your last question?
I really wasn't a question. It was more or less a statement that werewolves are a conglomerate element of a large wolf-like creature, like a cryptid of some sort, and and combine that with someone locally who basically isn't all there, and you combine those two into what we know of as the werewolf. And I was just asking.
I'm sure, yes, both of those have gone into it.
No, okay. Apparently,
sorry, nothing came to mind there.
It's okay. It's late or early.
Yeah, it's definitely late there.
Someone on the chat room says hirsutism is the hair growing disease.
They're wrong. It is porphyria. It's right here. I'm going to post a link in the.
Okay.
It's a 64 article Proceedings of Royal Society of Medicine. Let's see. Proposed porphyry might be an explanation for werewolf legends. More than 20 years later, in 1985, David Dolphin presented a paper at the meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, proposing that it also might be an explanation for vampire legends.
Oh, so maybe it just goes both ways.
Yeah.
And that also could, there's a tie in there too, in the fact that vampires have a clearly in the myths and legends have a shape-shifting ability, and yet werewolves and were-creatures, I guess you could call them, that's all they really are. That's their ability is to shape-shift. We have to assume that both of these types of creatures are real, but it would be fairly easy to confuse one for the other, I imagine.
In some of the stories, lots of the stories of there's a famous case of Peter Stubb in Germany, near Cologne, I think. Lots of the accounts of werewolves put it down to have a sort of magic belt which turns them into change their shape.
Mm-hmm.
Quite where that came from, I'm not sure, unless it's it goes back to the sort of shaman thing of putting on the animal's skin and then acting like the animal.
Oh. That seems to be a pretty good theory about it.
Have you ever had any experience with? Have you ever seen anything that made you turn your head twice out? Maybe out in the.
Oh, no, in the realms of vampires.
Yeah,
werewolves. Not really. I don't think. Not direct experience of anything like that.
Huh.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I was looking at something over here on the website.
Sorry, it's okay.
And there was another question that I had, and I completely lost it about werewolves.
I once saw. I've got other things. I have seen other things like
okay.
lake monsters and stuff. But
is that so? Well, tell us about that. That'd be.
Well, there was a thing when I grew up in Africa till I was 16, and lived by the Zambezi River. And a friend of mine once went down to the river to mess about, and we were crossing this fallen log across a stream, and there's this shape below us which looked like a turtle about 4 foot wide, turtle's back. And the guy was with being a sort of young lad, just chucked lots of rocks in to see what would happen. And we saw these nostrils appear sort of downstream a bit, and nothing else. And we went back a couple of weeks later, and it was there again. And you couldn't see a length of the body, so we're pretty sure it wasn't a crocodile, but you didn't get turtles that big in the Zambezi.
And the Zambezi, that's in Southeast Africa? Am I close there?
South Central Africa. So there's something that was never explained, and was something weird. It's hard, I'm looking back on that because you could say, well, maybe it was a crocodile or something, but they have quite distinctive markings on their back. Mm-hmm. So there's something strange I've seen, but it's nothing to do with vampires.
Well, it has something to do with our show. I mean, we talk about all kinds of stuff.
We're going to talk about it anyway.
Right. Yeah, basically. Come to think of it, about that notion about a man putting on a animal skin and therefore becoming the animal in the myth, and then they turn into the werewolf mythically, like the shape-shifting creature. If I remember correctly, there's a myth about that too, involving witches as well, especially here in North America, and more specifically here in North Carolina. I think I remember a myth about a woman that was married to a man, and she would go and put on this cloak and sort of turn into an animal at night and then come back. But she wasn't considered a werewolf, I guess. It was more like more of a witch, yeah. And so therefore, I think the myth ends when the guy realizes what's going on, and he puts like red pepper and stuff in the cloak, and then she can't get out of it, basically.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So
there was in here in Scotland. There's mermaids. There was this legends about mermaids. If they came ashore, they could take human form, but you had to hide their skin to stop them going back to sea, which is something similar, because they become a seal if they put the skin back on.
Right, I guess it's a well, I mean, these our myths really derive from the myths in Europe, and but it's also interesting too that here that's something attributed to a witch, whereas as you were saying before, in Germany it was a werewolf. That was that's how the werewolf
right, yeah,
put it on. So once again, the sort of the crossing over of the different myths and how they just sort of blur between what's a witch, what's a vampire, what's a werewolf.
I think they blur in all those things. I mean, you see some of the same ideas repeated over and over again. About things that ward them off and this, that, and the other. And it's kind of funny how they all have their same or similar origins.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm sure
even in different cultures, it's surprising. I mean, in China, there's so many similar ideas about vampires that it's really weird, given that sort of limited contact between China and the West.
Oh yeah.
Their ideas about vampires are almost identical to what we think of in Eastern Europe.
So in all that history, there's bound to be a little truth,
Yeah, that's basically what all those people talking about these things. Separated by distance.
Set them off, yeah.
There has to be some sort of a real thing that came about to set all those people off, right?
Let me give you the numbers again here. It's 800-960-2289. That's 800-960-2289. You can call us live and speak with Nigel, or locally 336-996-1596.
Okay, I got another one actually. It's from the chat room, and it's one word, and it reminds me of these shapeshifters. Selkies. Do you know what I'm talking about, Nigel?
Yeah, Selkies. That was kind of what I was saying about those the Scottish mermaids.
Okay.
Yeah, Selkies is the word for them.
Okay, so
it's quite an interesting rational explanation for that, because there was a whole tribe of people that used to spend almost all their time at sea in canoes. And they'd spend weeks just out at sea in these canoes, and this was possibly part of what led to the legend of Selkies, because then as they came ashore they'd have to get out of their boat. But they were actually perfectly human people that came from Scandinavia, but they just liked living at sea. They like the Inuit, probably very similar habits. They'd go fishing and just stay out there.
And I'm sorry.
Get off the chat room. Talk to the guest. Get off the chat room.
I'm sorry. It's hard doing that.
I know.
Juggling several
Well, you got
things.
that question from the chat room. That's good.
Well, yeah. And I guess I was a little misinformed about the Selkie. I thought it was some sort of shape-shifting sea creature.
We're gonna have to take another short break here.
Sorry.
So we'll be back in about 4.5 minutes, guys. World of the Unexplained with us and Nigel Suckling. Hang tight.
Be back in a minute.
And we're back. We always do that, don't we?
Our sense of timing is horrible.
Nigel, you still with us?
Yeah, sure.
All right, great. Okay, so let's move on
to the third book.
Yes.
You wanna?
Witches.
Yes.
What can you tell? I had a question, and I told the person in the chat room that we would come back to it as soon as we got on to witches. But the question was, and now I've got to scroll up and find it. Crap. It was something about
their physical appearance.
Yeah, the nose. Hang on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Ask him how the witch came to be depicted with a mole on the nose and hunchback.
Oh, right. Well, obviously, the Halloween hag witch is a sort of quite a cruel image, but there's a certain amount of, for a start, most of the witches who were during the sort of Great Persecution, they're mostly old ladies, old women living on their own. So, and there's the most famous, Mother Shipton, who's one of the most famous, who actually never suffered any problem from persecution, even though she lived during the dangerous times. Well, she had some sort of deformation, which people assume was a hunchback, and so she probably looked a bit like the Halloween hag of well, she's a wonderful lady. And the pointed hat was a combination of, well, partly it was traditional hat at the time was a sort of stovepipe hat, sort of tapering stovepipe hat, well, for a while anyway. Also, the Spanish Inquisition used to put conical hats on people just before they burnt them, and that's sort of kind of where the tradition came from.
Okay.
But in the contemporary pictures of witches going back to the 17th century, they aren't, well, sometimes they are, but they're as often shown as with just ordinary everyday headwear as with pointed hats. And when they are shown as pointed hats, it's because they were popular at the time. It's only recently that they sort of come to get this image.
What about the nose?
Well, the hook nose, well, it's kind of a deformation, really. It's sort of, these are sort of depictions by their enemies. So, you know, the sort of evil crone, cackling cone. I suppose warts are vaguely associated with toads as well.
Yeah.
And toads were common familiars, well, supposedly common familiars, and they all sort of went together in that, probably in that hammer of the witches. Yeah. And warts anywhere on the body were often used as a, they were considered sort of devil's nipples, so that they'd be shown on the face as a matter of course, because witches are supposed to be covered in warts.
The devil's nipples.
Yeah, they're familiar. Devils familiar would feed off them, and they would have these extra, and they were often used as excuses to accuse them of witches. Finding warts or moles on the body was often enough to send some poor people off to the horrible end.
And actually, I imagine.
We have a saying. Hang on, we have a saying in America. It's cold as a witch's titty. Do you have that same saying there?
No, but I'm sure. I'm sure something similar was said about them. Yeah, at the time. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Trent. You had a real question.
There's actually a statement, but I also have a question involving the Inquisition with the conical hats. What I was saying was that the old ladies also, at least over here, and I'm sure it's very similar in a lot of older traditions, the old ladies would also be the midwife / herbalist / they would go and concoct these remedies using natural ingredients or whatever to sort of fix people, but it was sort of like a unspoken thing when you were actually I can remember right now locally in just the recent years I met a lady who had these sort of home-brewed remedies, and she was this old lady, and she lived pretty much out there. And it
was kind of more of a voodoo thing, though. When you think?
Well, I mean, I think it crosses traditions, but I mean, do you think that would also sort of attribute those particular ladies for being targeted as witches, having some kind of?
Oh, definitely, yes. The midwives, and there was kind of a demonization of the whole wise woman thing. Because they were very accepted. In the Middle Ages, wise women were the midwives, and they dealt in herbs and stuff. And it was kind of knocked aside with the plagues in about the 14th, 15th century. Everything kind of shook, the confidence shook. And then the church jumped in and took advantage of this, because they'd always been a bit suspicious anyway of these wise women. And then they became demonized as... So the midwife thing was, there would be midwives, doctors, and everything else. And this is kind of why the witches were accused of using babies in their brews and stuff like that. It was, it was kind of it was an unconscious thing. It was a projection. It wasn't really a deliberate, concerted campaign, consciously thought out. It was kind of a projection of a horrified male establishment trying to keep these women.
Right. The other real question that I had from the chat room was that when the Inquisition put conical hats on supposed witches, is that where we get the sort of the tradition of putting a dunce cap on someone's head when we sit them in the corner?
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yes. Absolutely.
Trent, did you have a dunce cap put on your head when you were a child?
I practically wore one every day, Scott.
Oh, man.
Not because I'm not doing my work, just
now
doing other things besides.
How does this older tradition, as time has changed over time and things have shifted into modern day witchcraft, into what's considered a modern day witch, maybe the Witches Society, or some people may call it Wicca Society? Well, do you address that in your book? Do you talk about that?
Absolutely, yes. It's quite interesting because it's kind of in the 19th century. The 18th century saw the end of the kind of persecution of witchcraft. In the 19th century, there's kind of almost a reversion to back before, where wise men and wise women were suddenly accepted again, and it's quite strange that lots of their beliefs were recorded by vicars now, who saw it as a quaint sort of folklore thing, and didn't see it as a threat anymore. So there was kind of, in the 19th century, there was quite a revival of folklore in the country by wise women, wise men, and it was kind of dissociated from witchcraft in the sense of, the branding. They never called themselves witches, but it was kind of, there was a revival from then on of what probably was the kind of skills of the witches before they became persecuted. Herbalism, all kinds of holistic kind of healing stuff. So most of modern Wicca is probably a lot like, well, there's two different groups. There's a sort of individual modern witches and the ones who have groups and covens and organise themselves. I believe officially registered as churches over there in the States, some of them. You can now. It's no longer a prescribed thing. Ever since 1965, there's a case where a pagan group established themselves as a church of Wicca and became recognised under the law. So you can do that legally now.
Yeah. Quite different from the days of old.
Yeah, we don't throw the witches in the water, so to speak.
The old Monty Python,
Oh yeah, with the weighs the same as a goose, I think.
I don't remember.
Yeah, it's a goose, I think.
I don't remember. Anyway.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well.
Did you find what's?
Okay. We got a call.
Hang on just a second. We have a caller. Hello, caller. Where are you calling from? This is Your Own World of the Unexplained.
Calling from the Washington, D.C. area.
Great. What's your question?
I don't know if I missed it a little earlier. I came late to the show, but does the guest put actual credence in witches' ability to transform things, or is he simply describing what's sort of a religion, for lack of a better term?
In that last bit, I was describing a religion as such, not the working of magic and the sort of conjuring of. It's to do with emotions and feelings rather than. Yes, I'm not talking about witches in the sense of being able to wave their wand and conjure up or change people to toads or anything like that at all. That's more of a sort of a fantasy sort of thing.
Yes. We had to
we
apologize,
had to drop that caller. I don't know what.
There was some kind of weird echo. It's like I said, Nigel, before, we have technical difficulties practically every show.
Yeah,
so there was some kind of weird delay effect going on there. Well, what about the myth of the flying broom? Is that totally Hollywood, or where'd that come from?
No, there was. It was part of the. Yes, it's definitely part of a witch's equipment. Was the flying broom, and there's been quite a lot of debate about what exactly was involved, but certainly riding a broom as a hobby horse was part of witch rituals here in the sort of 17th century. Well, one reason for it was that the flying was often stimulated by, drugs basically, aconite and henbane and stuff like that. And one way of ingesting them, a bit less dangerous than swallowing them, was to make them into a potion and then rub them into the skin. But it had to be a sensitive area of the skin, so it would be rubbed onto a broom handle, and I don't know how delicately to put this, but then that would be sort of rubbed between the legs. The broom handle being smooth.
That's pretty delicate.
And then you're flying, you see. So that was, it's definitely part of. It's not a Hollywood invention.
Okay.
So diddling with a broomstick.
Diddling with a broomstick.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, well, you learn something new every day.
And some things you don't want to know, but we're going to talk about it anyway.
Okay, Scott. Repeating ourselves. Okay.
I can't. That was good.
And then, so the notion, the next thing, the notion of the familiar, namely the toad or the black cat or the.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Well, at least partly it was part of those witch-finding manuals. So King James I of England, he wrote one, which was used along with the Malleus Maleficarum as one of the main books that was used to try witches. Sorry, what's the starting point again?
Huh? Oh, what?
What was the question again?
Oh, I was basically the concept of the witch's familiar, namely toads, toads and black cats.
Well, it was it would either be a cat or commonly a toad. Under pressure, witches were expected to confess to having familiar, because this was the agreed path into witchcraft was that first of all they would meet usually a dark man and submit to becoming. He's sometimes called the devil, but more often they called him like the Lord of the Woods or something like that. The witches themselves didn't see him as the devil, but of course he was seen as the devil. And they'd make a compact with this man of the woods, or this dark man, or the devil as he was seen. And to seal the compact, they would be given a familiar. And this could be in any form. Occasionally it was a dog, but more usually it was a cat. Or toads were very, and this was how the devil or the Lord would communicate with the witch. They'd tell their familiar what they wanted, and then the familiar would speak back to them in his own language and tell them what their Lord and Master would, prepare to give or something. So it was part of the... it was what everyone believed witches had, was a familiar. So along with strange nipples on their bodies, they would go searching for toads or cats or whatever. And of course, lots of old women old women living on their own would be bound to have cats or other animals around the house, which they're, just for company.
Well, modern witchcraft utilizes familiars too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I believe so, but it's not something I know enormous about in modern witchcraft.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting. Well, tell us, we're going to get off the subject of witchcraft for a little bit. Tell us about some of the other stuff you've read in the fairy books and the unicorn stuff. What got you into that?
Well, really just following curiosity, and then some of the things that came up are really just what publishers were doing at the time. I usually have a list of topics I'd like to write on. Unicorns were the first... after I'd done a lot of books about artists, interviews, biographies of artists, unicorns were the first time where the artists and me got to do a book from scratch, if you follow me. Mm-hmm. And it's just a favourite subject. And I'm now doing another small book on unicorns to go in the series, same sort of format as these three books, just because there's a lot to say about them. And, lots of interesting things, like, as with werewolves and that, they have actually existed up to a point. There's, unicorn animals are not totally unnatural or fantasy creation.
I remember when I was a kid, we have the Barnum and Bailey circus that comes by here, yeah. And when I was a kid, do you remember that scam? Yeah, they claimed that they had a unicorn.
Yes, that's right. Well, they did. It was there was a guy called Otto Gazelle, I think he called himself, who knew a bit about biology. And there was an experiment done back in the 30s by a doctor who had read... he read various stuff, and he thought he could see a way of doing it. So he took a bull, and when bulls are born, the horn buds are they're actually in the skin. They're not actually, the horns don't grow out of the skull. They're skin tissues that then grow into the skull.
Okay.
So he took his horn buds and put it joined it together in the middle of its forehead, and he got a unicorn bull. Well, that's what this guy did in the 80s. Did the same thing with goats. And they all got it from, in Nepal, this is what they used to do. In 1906, I think it was, the King of Nepal sent a present to the Prince of Wales here of a bunch of exotic animals for the London Zoo, and including 2 unicorn rams. And when they looked into it, it was a trick they had out in Nepal. They'd worked out how to do the same thing. And they also used to do this in Ethiopia. They used to make unicorns by this little trick of transplanting these horn buds. And then they used to give them off to other kings who would, say, well, have a unicorn. and totally astonish them because it's a so you do get natural unicorns. Well, you can make them. I suppose they're artificial unicorns.
Yeah, well, natural. Kind of.
And they occasionally occur in nature. One-horned rams, occasionally crop up in nature.
Well, I've got a question in the chat room. Also, ask him if he thinks that magic is real. They spell magic with a K, so...
Oh, right. Well, of course it depends on your definition of magic. I mean, I think it's real in the sense that... we were talking earlier about Wicca, where your inquirer asked whether... What we were talking about here with the witchcraft, whether you're conjuring things out of nothing. With modern witchcraft, the same thing applies to magic. It's a lot of it is to do with, mood, really, and getting the right mood in order to achieve things, rather than magic. Well, maybe it exists, but I wouldn't personally say either way. I don't have experience to be able to conjure things up, or I suppose I'm quite interested in fortune-telling mediums, and that's where you're treading into the irrational sort of things like the I Ching or tarot cards. I got involved in that last year and did a set of tarot cards with some artist friends. Well, that's very strange because from a rational point of view, well, you're in strange territory because is that doing magic and are the cards talking to you from a subtler perspective, or are you just projecting onto the cards what you want to, or your unconscious wants to tell you?
Yeah.
Well, it's a tricky area. I mean, I have an open mind about that. I wouldn't be able to say solidly one way or another. But a kind of magic, yes, certainly.
What about, now, I'm not familiar with this. Maybe you are, Trent, and hopefully you are, Nigel. There was a story years ago about some girls finding, I think it turned out to be a hoax, I'm not sure, about finding fairies in Ireland or something like that.
Oh, I remember
the Cottington fairies.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that. I remember hearing something about it. Was that deemed to be a hoax, or was that deemed to be something?
It was in the end, yes, but the girls who did it said that they did see fairies, but they couldn't capture them on film, so they then hoaxed it.
I got it.
And the whole subject of seeing fairies is quite interesting because in Ireland, especially, which is quite a magical place, I mean, people firmly believed in leprechauns till I'd say 100 years ago.
Really?
And I read an account even from about 15 years ago of someone who went to Ireland, and they said it's the weirdest thing because they sort of almost declared themselves mad, but they were going for a walk, and they did actually see a leprechaun, and they couldn't believe their eyes.
Yeah.
And it was just like in the tales, so the thing was there, and then it vanished. So I think it takes a certain kind of mentality. In Ireland, I think they carry on seeing things like leprechauns and fairies a lot longer than elsewhere, where people are a bit less sort of magically inclined, or the country's less magically inclined. But that Cottington fairies was a hoax. Conan Doyle was the Sherlock Holmes guy. He was totally taken in by it. But the girls did admit later that they had hoaxed him.
What do leprechauns look like exactly, or what are they? Are there different versions? Or there?
Yeah, we have a slightly skewed vision of them.
We've got.
Oh right, yes.
We have a cereal box.
Yeah, as we say, we have Lucky Charms, the cereal box. Yes.
I'm sure is not completely
true.
Accurate.
Yeah. Well, I think they're a bit sort of stylized now, in that like garden gnomes. They're a bit kind of. But the one that this guy saw just recently, 10 or 15 years ago. Well, he said, he had green skin for a start, and was the clothing was a bit indeterminate. It looked more like leaves and like leaves and sort of natural stuff. But in the stories from Ireland from say 100 or 200 years ago, they tend to be dressed slightly old-fashioned. They had three-cornered hats, for example, about 100 years after people had stopped wearing them. So their dress tended to lag behind, 50, 100 years behind everybody else's sense of dress. But basically slightly old-fashioned. So now they'd probably look in Victorian, stroke early 20th century kind of dress. But there's so many different accounts, because lots of accounts of seeing leprechauns say they wear red hats, but it varies really. I mean, there's no solidly consistent version of what leprechauns look like, except that they're small, about 18 inches tall, and they're usually tapping away on a shoe, and they can disappear if you take your eyes off them.
So what about the pot of gold?
Oh, the pot of gold, yes, definitely associated. Well, in Ireland, I mean, there's loads of buried treasure anyway from the old Celtic days. So this is kind of, because they were supposed to be a fairy, and as fairies, they knew where all the treasure was buried. So there was a certain kind of, the treasure was usually buried in fairy mounds, which were often burial chambers of the old Celtic kings. And leprechauns were kind of associated with that area, as with the other fairy people. So there is a connection between, they would tend to, where you found leprechauns, there probably would be a fairy hill nearby, and that fairy hill probably really is quite likely to contain gold. Lots of them have produced treasure. So that's kind of the association.
So, I hope I say this right. I'm no expert on Gaelic or whatever. I've also heard a common myth, moving along to leprechauns here, that the leprechauns could also, in a way, be the remnants of the Tuatha De Danann or whatever.
Yeah.
So that they're the original inhabitants of Ireland.
The fairy people in Ireland generally are said to be the remains of the Tuatha, but and I don't know how to pronounce it either. Actually.
Okay, good.
But leprechauns are a bit aside, actually. They are in a slightly different tradition, because they have trooping fairies and solitary fairies in Ireland, and the trooping fairies are meant to be the ones who are descended from the old Tuatha who ruled the country, and who were very big at the time. They gradually dwindled over time. So solitary fairies are something slightly different. So no one's quite sure what the connection is, but they are a fairy people. But they seem to be slightly separate from, as with gnomes, they're slightly separate from the main fairy race, in tradition.
I've got a question. I just want to jump back to the leprechaun thing for a moment.
We were talking about leprechaun.
Fairies or whatever. Yeah, they're fairies. So
go ahead, Scott.
Anyway, the question was: are leprechauns generally considered evil or good or in the middle? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking.
They're sort of mischievous. Huh. Traditionally, in Ireland, they were considered actually slightly wicked, but not actually malevolent.
Uh-huh.
So they'd play tricks on you, and they certainly wouldn't give up their gold if they could help it. But they weren't actually, and they might play tricks, but they weren't actually harmful. There were a kind of leprechaun called pluricorns down in the southwest who used to raid people's wine cellars, get incredibly drunk, and do lots of damage. A bit like poltergeists,
Yeah.
But no, on the whole, they were slightly mischievous, and they'd play tricks, and they wouldn't give up their gold too easily, just out of the goodness of their hearts, because they didn't like people that much. So slightly mischievous,
and not antisocial.
Well, I just remember the Hollywood movies, the Leprechaun.
Oh, Scott, don't even. I cannot believe you stained this radio show.
I always bring up the worst possible movies.
You brought up Warlock 2.
Warlock 2,
That was a horrible movie.
No, I'm bringing up. They did like six versions of that.
Yeah,
they did like Leprechaun 2, Leprechaun 3, Leprechaun in the Hood.
Stop.
Okay.
They did Leprechaun Space, I think.
Yeah, no, it's awful. Well, anyway, we're gonna have to take a break, guys.
I'm sorry, Nigel.
Sorry, Nigel.
I really am. That was not necessary.
Have you seen the Leprechaun movies, Nigel?
Well, I have seen. It is quite a wicked leprechaun, isn't it, in the movie?
Oh yeah. That's why I was asking if it was evil. Yeah.
I caught part of one. Well, it's not. The Irish leprechauns would probably be a bit cross on that portrayal,
Yeah, I imagine so.
We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with Nigel here on World of the Unexplained. Sorry, man.
There are some things in this world that go way beyond human understanding. Things that cannot be explained. Things that most people don't want to know about.
But we're going to talk about them anyway. World of the Unexplained with Jay Scott and Trent Lackey. Heard Mondays live from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern on the OmniSound Radio 1 network.
Right here, baby.
www.OmniSoundRadio1.net.
Okay, we're back, and we've got a caller on the other line. Nigel, are you still with us?
I'm with, yes.
I hope I didn't drop that caller.
We'll find out in a second.
Yeah. Caller, you with us? Hello, caller? Hello?
Well, you gotta stop doing that. Stop.
I don't know why we're getting feedback on that. This has never happened before.
Okay.
Well, I guess they're not.
Caller, we're sorry about that.
Call back.
There's a 2-minute delay after all, and please call back.
Yeah, okay.
Now, you wanted to talk about something called the witch bottle, Nigel.
Oh, right, yes. This was, well, it's an interesting thing. Something I've been interested for a few years, because years ago, a friend of mine working in a building site dug out this bottle from they were just sort of demolishing a wall or something. They found this weird bottle of it, full of strange stuff. And after that, I kept hearing about this, and they do regularly crop up in old buildings. And it's not a very widely known thing, but for hundreds of years, these were a regular part of people's lives.
I hate to interrupt you, Nigel, but we got that caller.
Yeah.
Again. Hello, caller. Where are you calling from?
All right, it's Scott and Emily in Omaha.
Oh, great. Awesome.
What's your question?
Well, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the leprechaun topic. My daughter's a big fan of fairy lore and leprechauns and such, and we've actually built a couple of leprechaun traps for St. Patrick's Day, and she also builds fairy houses. We've got one out in the backyard right now. It has a fairy bait in it to try to attract fairies to move in.
Wow.
Because we're not going to try to catch them. She just wants to see them. But if it's okay, she wanted to tell you a little bit about the trap she built, the mechanics of how it works.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Sure. Okay.
Fairy lore of how tradition says that you can actually catch and hold a leprechaun.
Now, you know, Nigel's got some good books with wonderful illustrations on this stuff.
Cool. Well, here's Emily.
Okay.
Hello?
Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Tell us about your fairy traps.
Well, the leprechaun one or the fairy one?
Either one.
Okay, yeah, both.
Tell us about the leprechaun one.
Well, you take this kind of flower called ragwort and like a gold coin or something like that, and then you put it at the beginning of a hill, and then when a leprechaun comes, you jump out and grab his hat, and if you have his hat, he'll go anywhere you want with him.
Oh, okay. Okay, what about your fairy trap?
I take a cardboard box, and I cut out windows and a door, and then I put little furniture in there, and sometimes little pieces of food.
Oh, awesome. So, no luck yet? No luck yet catching one?
What'd you say? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Have you caught anything yet?
No.
Okay. Still working on it.
Yeah.
All right.
It sounds like a good strategy, though. I think you need to keep it up and
oh yeah,
let us know.
And let us keep us informed. Can I speak with your dad again?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good talking to you.
Scott here.
Okay, Scott. Hey, how's it going? Thanks. That was awesome.
Hey, did she tell you how the leprechaun trap worked?
Yes, she did actually. She did. Yeah.
Well, this one, it was a box that had a battery and a motor inside of it, and we connected a gold coin to a pull cord. And when the leprechaun pulls the cord, it activates a spiral disc that hypnotists use to hypnotize people. And the leprechaun becomes so hypnotized by the spinning disc, and he also won't let go of the coin because he's such a greedy little guy. Then you just come and you whack him on the head, and then he'll do whatever you want.
So does this jive with your idea of leprechaun catching, Nigel?
Well, yes, I'm sure that leprechauns won't be too bothered by that. But
we're still perfecting it. We don't know if it works yet, but we'll let you know when we catch one.
Okay, fantastic.
Thanks a lot, Scott.
All right, thanks.
Take care. All right.
Well,
that was interesting.
That was a first, I think.
Yeah, I've never had never had that happen
child
before. Yeah,
talk on the show.
That's like so legally. Like I'm gonna have to get before I can post that in the archives. I'm gonna have to get his permission on that as a guardian. Yeah,
unbelievable.
I'm sorry, dude. Gotta look out.
Okay, well,
for
then that's fine.
Anyway.
I mean, it was cute. Fantastic.
All right, Nigel, tell us about this witch bottle.
Okay.
Oh, right, yes, witch bottles.
So your friend
use them to fend off attacks of magic, you know. So they're trying to... the point of a witch bottle is to make a sort of a substitute for yourself. So this is very widespread all over Europe, and even sort of down in Africa, they have similar ideas. So the idea is if people are directing bad spells at you, the spell's going to come along and it's going to sort of find the witch bottle, I think it's you, and get trapped inside it. So people got a bottle, and they'd pee in it, basically.
Oh, wonderful.
Common thing.
And we still do that to this day.
That would sort of give... we have to put some personal juices in it to... and then you sort of... you could write your name on a piece of paper and plop that in. Or you could, if you're brave, put a picture of yourself in. And then you shove in a few things to trap the spell, which is like... or thorns, or a bit of barbed wire, or something like that. And anything poisonous would help as well, a bit of sort of deadly nightshade or something. Then you seal this thing, and you bury it like under your front doorstep, or under your fireplace is common, wherever sort of spells get into the house. And so as the sort of someone casts a spell on you of bad luck, as the spell comes your way, it'll get distracted by this bottle and go in there and keep you from harm. It's a very widespread belief, but people have almost forgotten about them. And there were these very popular jars used for dispensing wine in inns all over Europe, which was like earthenware jars, which had a face stamped on them, called bellowing jars, for various reasons. And these were the most popular things for witch bottles, because that made it look even more like a real person, because it had a face on it. It's quite a forgotten tradition, considering everyone used to do it at one time.
Yeah, no, we've never even been familiar with that.
No,
I'm sure in New England you have they must come out of old buildings, you know, because would have been carried across at the time when they were very popular.
We don't really talk to those Yankees up there. No,
well, okay.
We don't know nothing about
That's
those
fine,
guys.
Scott. You know, let's see the French, New Yorkers.
Hey man, I'm knocking on everybody tonight.
Oh no, I'm kidding.
But yeah, so we really need to get you back on here, Nigel, and talk about the whole fairy thing and the unicorn thing and the leprechaun thing.
Yeah.
This is really some interesting stuff.
Well, yeah, I'd be happy to, because that's after I'm doing this book on the second book on unicorns. I'm going to be doing one on Celtic fairies.
Oh right.
This is going to be quite a big book. This is it'll be like these three books together, really: vampires, witches, and werewolves, but all together. So that's going to be for the rest of the year my kind of main preoccupation.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be great to talk to you about that.
Okay.
Well, I suppose I'd leave it till I've done some of it. But
that'd be awesome.
Right.
Well, we've got about 3 minutes left. Any final words, or?
Well, if you talk to Linda Godfrey, give her my regards, the Bray Road lady, because we had quite a nice chat by email.
Oh.
And
is this book going to be in the States as well in October?
Yeah, I think it's Sterling Publishing.
Okay.
Or possibly Barnes and Noble will be.
I was going to say, if you can't get it in the U.S. bookstores, I'm sure you can get it on Amazon.com. Or...
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, yes, you should be able to, yeah.
All right, well, great. Well, we'll definitely look for it, and like I said, any parting words, or...
I'm trying to get inspired here, but nothing really comes to mind. I'm sure there's something about witches that I had in mind beforehand, which is quite entertaining, but I've totally forgotten it.
I promise you'll think about it about 4 hours from now, way after the fact. You'll come up with it.
Well, 4 hours from now, he's probably going to be asleep.
Well, right, but okay, good point.
I'll probably wake with a start.
Yeah, I've done that as well. It's like, of course, that's a brilliant. Oh, Nigel,
Well, thank you so much, Nigel. We've had a great time.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you both.
Okay.
All right, great. Well, we'll talk with you later. Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay, take care.
You too, bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
And that was Nigel Suckling.
Yep.
Wow. That's good stuff, man. Good stuff.
It was. I mean, there's quite a lot of quite a lot of material, like
So
he was saying.
Who all have I made fun of tonight? I made fun of
the French.
the French.
New Yorkers.
New Yorkers. They fall. Well, no, they don't really fall in the Yankee category because they're so weird.
Yeah,
anyway.
they're New Yorkers. And then they have Yankees.
Yeah, the Yankees.
Like E-E-E-E-S. And maybe E-E-E-Z. Yankees.
Did I make fun of the Irish? No, I didn't do that.
No. Well, you played Irish music on the show. So
yeah, well, I wasn't making fun because I like the Irish people.
Right, well.
Not that I don't like Yankees. I mean, yeah, like Eric's here with us tonight, and he's a Yankee. We make fun of him.
He's from Ohio, so he's a Yankee.
He qualifies.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to stop a little early tonight. Not much early, but me and Eric, actually, the Yankee,
we'll call him don't call him Eric anymore. Just call him
the Yank.
The Yankee. Yeah. No, because we're
Yankee.
Yanks. We're all Yanks. According
that's true.
To the British.
Yeah, that's true.
You know.
So anyway, so me and the Yankee went to
that's great. We'll get code names.
We went to God Almighty.
Move on.
We're gonna get email over this. Anyway, so Eric and I went to the Yankee and I went to went out to Asheville, North Carolina this week, and we delivered 3 bottles of water that Joshua P. Warren had given to me to safeguard for the Genesis Project.
And the Genesis Project is essentially using collective will or mental power, essentially spontaneously generating life in what is basically
sterile water.
Pure water.
Yeah, it was buried in the spot under the ground.
Yeah.
And they had a picture of it on their Lemur team website.
And everybody's supposed to go to the website and sort of concentrate, try to generate life inside of it using mind power alone.
Yeah, so that's why we called it the Genesis Project. Well, anyway, so we took these bottles out to this testing facility where we spoke with Dr. Dave, and Dr. Dave did a set of
Was he a nice guy?
Oh, he's a great guy. Great guy. Awesome guy. Okay. He did a series of experiments. We actually have it on videotape. And he did a series of experiments on the water. And I don't know what the results are. Now, we should know them by now. I don't know. I'm sure Joshua might know them. Eric's checking it. You got anything back there, Eric? I'm working on it. Okay, he's trying to check his email now.
We got a couple of minutes.
But we're definitely going to let you guys know next week, if not before the show's over tonight. We've got about 14 minutes. If he sees it, I hope he'll holler at us. But holler at us, Yankee.
Holler at us, Yankee.
Holler at us, Southern gentlemen here. If you find...
My God, here in North Carolina. That's the worst Southern accent. It's really funny. I have lived here my entire life. I probably have the worst Southern accent. I don't understand why. My mom and dad have great, good North Carolinian accents, and it's horrible. I'm sorry.
It doesn't matter. Anyway, so we're going to see what those projects was. It was a joint Lemur / World of the Unexplained relationship there. Yeah. So me and Trent and I are happy to be involved in this. And anyway, you can check that out.
Idea.
I'm going to post the link eventually on our site along with the results so you guys can see it. But it was a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll get some results back from that are what we want and see some life developing in these
what
things.
Kind of life? That's what I'm curious.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we're just looking for kind of like I don't know, any kind of bacteria at all is showing something, because there's no way that anything could have gotten into there because it was sterile water, it was sealed, it was buried in a hole, and then
not even those chemosynthetic kind of organisms.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The things that thrive in, say, highly toxic mineral deposits like near volcanoes or hot springs. A lot of biologists say they're the first forms of life on the planet. They don't need oxygen and water to survive. They basically generate their own food sources using toxic forms of chemicals. When the world was more dangerous, full of volcanoes and toxic ash and stuff like that.
Okay.
But it's something like that could thrive in a,
Well, yeah. Well, you know what it's time for, right?
I'm not sure. Oh, yeah.
Okay,
That's right.
This is going to be the demise of the Crack House tonight if no one calls in. So, if no one calls in tonight, we're not going to do the Crack House anymore.
Mm-hmm. Basically.
So this could be the last night of the Wotu $2 Crack House Pyramid.
That's a great idea, but we need support to...
and we're giving away free stuff, too.
That's true.
What's in the Crack House? I think it's... Adam Gorightly's book, The Prankster and the Conspiracy. We spoke with Adam earlier today for a pre-record, and that'll be on later in July. But we'll talk about what we've got coming up after this game starts. So call us here at 800-960-2289
or
336-996-1596. That 800 number again is 800-960-2289. Both of these numbers can be received on our webpage at worldoftheunexplained.com. So I'm going to crank the music, and hopefully we'll get a caller. I'm looking for the music. Sorry, so I was making all these noises with this stuff. Where is my crack house? Man, I did this last time. You remember that? It's very
air.
Yeah, it's very embarrassing. I found it. Here we go, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, and those of other persuasions, lock your doors and hide your valuables, because it's time now for another exciting round of the game show everybody's talking about in abandoned alleys everywhere. It's the 1-2 Crack House $2 Pyramid. So give it up for the tycoons of trivia, Jay Scott and Trent Lackey, who every week give away their stuff to some lucky listener.
I love that game show theme.
Who doesn't?
Okay, we haven't got any callers yet.
Well, we still have a little bit of time.
I know.
So it's all cool.
Can't believe all these people listen to our show and don't.
Well,
I think it's because they don't like the Crack House. So we're gonna get rid of it. That's fine.
Well, that's basically it. And then.
But we want to bring the Woe2 challenge here.
Yeah.
And that's
challenge.
We're sending that out to Sean Manchester and his gang out there at Vampire Research Society. They've been slamming me so hard with all these emails, and then they posted on our guest book, and that's great. Knock our guest, that's fine.
Here's the caller.
But we'll tell both sides of the story. That's the Woe2 challenge. Reverend Manchester, come on down. Here we go. Hello, caller.
Got to do the crack ice, man.
All right. Is this Rick?
Not see the crack ice go.
I understand.
Right,
is this Rick?
It is, man.
All right, great, Rick. We got over 10,000 people listening right now. Are you ready to make me look bad in front of all of them?
I don't know. These questions are pretty easy, Scott.
They're pretty easy.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in a hot seat tonight, so I'm gonna go outside, and Trent's gonna ask you the questions. How's that sound?
Sounds good, bud.
All right.
All right.
I'm going out now. It's 7.
I know, Scott.
Oh, sorry.
Well,
I didn't know, man. Went out the door.
Okay, here he goes, walking out the door.
All right, I'm out.
Okay, Rick. Basically, tonight's topic, of course, is for the next guest next week, which is Michael Tsarian. And it involves Atlantis and Irish things, actually. I know we talked about it tonight, but essentially Atlantis, more or less, and some tarot card stuff. Okay, Rick?
Okay.
So, without any further ado, crank up the little sound here. Let's get this started. Who first told the world about Atlantis?
That would be Socrates.
Very close. What is the capital of Ireland?
Dublin.
Okay. Name 2 of the 4 suits in the tarot deck. Hey, a spade.
No concept.
Okay, sorry. All right. What was Atlantis located?
A continent.
Okay. All right. Well. 2 out of 5. That's pretty good.
Okay.
All right. I'll just hold on to the answers in a second. Let me get Scott.
Sit down first. All right. You mind trouble?
Possibly.
All right. I'm curious.
Okay.
How many did he get?
We have got to fix these floors. It's ridiculous. Rick got 2.
You got 2?
Mm-hmm.
Rick, you there?
Yeah, I'm here, bud.
Okay. You got 2. Okay, that's scaring me a little bit.
Well, it's like I said. Hold on, let me cue up the music again.
Rick might win.
The
Okay.
Wotu.
The Wotu crack house music, or the time clock music.
I can almost see this fabulous prizes.
That's why we call it the $2 pyramid, Rick.
Wait, so is that a $2 rock I get? Is that what happened?
That's right.
I'd just get a really small crack pipe. A leprechaun crack.
I was going to say a leprechaun. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well.
All right, here we go.
All right, Scotty, you ready?
I'm ready.
You ready, fool?
I'm ready.
Let's go. Who first told the world about Atlantis?
Heinrich Schliemann, the same guy from Troy? No.
What is the capital of Ireland?
Dublin.
Name 2 of the 4 suits in the tarot deck.
Pass.
On what was Atlantis located?
Island.
Okay. Continent. And where is the Bimini Road?
Oh man, it's underwater. It's somewhere. I don't know what place. How many did I get?
I'm going to protest if you give him underwater, man.
Yeah, underwater is theoretically as true as Moscow is on land. You know what I mean? So I have to agree with you, Rick.
So Rick won.
Yeah.
All right, congratulations, Rick. You know
and it keeps the crack house alive for yet another week, right?
That's right. And I'm gonna send you books and stuff. Just to email me in the chat room, private message me with your address, and I'll send that stuff out this week.
Yeah.
Cool. Appreciate it, gents.
All right. Thanks so
Rick,
much,
thanks
man. Thanks for playing.
Have a good one.
How you too, buddy?
Keeping it alive for you, the listeners. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, all of our callers.
Wow.
I was happy.
Okay,
Very happy.
we just got informed by our program director that we've got a few extra minutes tonight. So we're running on about 8 more minutes. We can actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Talk.
Well, let me give you the answers, gentle listeners, what the answers were. Who first told the world about Atlantis? It was Plato.
Oh man,
it was Plato's grandfather.
I thought Heinrich Schliemann was a good
Heinrich Schliemann discovered
Troy. He discovered Troy.
Yeah, but I mean,
it's an ancient city.
You're right, but it's a completely different myth, though. Plato was way after.
A little older.
Way after Homer.
Oh.
Homer was like 1,000 years before.
No, I was talking about Schliemann. Anyway, I think that's the way I pronounce it. I don't know.
Yeah, Heinrich Schliemann. That's
okay.
right. And of course, was the capital of Ireland, Dublin.
Yeah, the only thing I got right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Name 2 of the 4 suits in the tarot deck. That would be wands, cups, swords, and discs or coins.
Oh, okay.
You know how you have spades, hearts.
I was gonna say diamonds, spades.
None of that. Yeah. On what is Atlantis located? Theoretically, it's an island, but Plato actually referred to it as a continent, I believe.
Okay.
It could be either one. Where is the Bimini Road? The Bimini Road is located off of the Caribbean islands.
Well, see, that's underwater.
Yeah, but I mean, come on. That's a lot. I think
I know.
I actually didn't get the final thing, but I mean, if you said that the Caribbean, you would be pretty close.
Yeah, well,
and that would be close enough for me because the world's a big place.
I'm not a sore
full of
loser.
unexplained things.
I'm not a sore loser, but right now I think it's fitting that we tell our listeners who we've got coming up. Our big one is Marshall Cup.
It's time.
It's time. It's on the site, and if they've been checking the site and they've been looking at the guests, if you haven't, go there now because we've got Marshall Cup from the new movie out from 21st Century Fox, the Omen movie.
That's right.
And you're probably going to hear it because I'm trying to go to the website now, and you're probably going to hear the my flash effects on here. But if you do, that's fine.
Just imagine it as the Pleasant Ocean.
The Pleasant Ocean, yeah. Well, next week we've got Michael Zarian on. He's born in Ireland. He's going to talk about his book, Atlantis, Alien Visitation, Genetic Manipulation. And he actually believes in leprechauns.
Yeah.
That should be interesting. And yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm just saying all these things way after St. Patrick's Day, but yet,
Yeah, no. Well, us. We can't follow a calendar. But the May 22nd, our good friend Joshua P. Warren's going to be on only for an hour. This is a special 3-hour show, guys, so don't miss this. It starts at 7 p.m., so mark your calendars down. That's not next week, but the week after. It starts at 7 p.m., and it's going to run to 10 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to start with the first hour of Joshua P. Warren, How to Hunt Ghosts, and his new book, Pet Ghost, Animal Encounters from Beyond the Grave. And then right after that, our pre-recorded interview with actor Marshall Cupp, who plays in the new movie from 21st Century Fox called The Omen, the role of Stephen Haynes. So if you've seen the original, guys, this is going to be a summer blockbuster. The release date is...
06.
That's right. 06.
June 6, 2006.
Yeah.
I mean, the marketing practically writes itself.
It does. And after that, we've got David Ferrant from the Highgate thing. And I want to
challenge.
There's the Wotu challenge, baby. Sean Manchester, if you're listening to me, call in. No, if you're listening to me, we want you on the show. And
this
is
a big deal. I mean, we started the show talking about the Highgate Vampire. That was our very first show.
We did, and we talked about Sean Manchester.
There was a lot of
we had
dead
like
air.
5 listeners or something.
but still,
that's before we got on with OmniSound, so that's not archived, I don't think.
No, well, I think it failed horribly, but. I mean, this is a big deal. I mean, it has been a big deal to us, and I think, in the world of the paranormal, it's something that happened a long time ago, and yet this animosity, this thing
still there between these guys, or at least on the one end. I don't know. I haven't asked David.
Right,
I'm sure he's probably got the same thing going on, but we want to hear both sides of the story.
I mean, it's huge,
and and I know that Sean Manchester hasn't given an interview in over. Gosh knows what was the last interview, Trent? 01?
Yeah, I think so.
02, something like that. It's coast to coast.
And yet,
so we are going to issue the challenge. If you want to send us an email, when you go to our guest book and you put stuff up about upcoming guests on our site.
Yeah, look at the guest book, guys.
Look at the guest book. We've written the response.
Yeah. David Front.
Yeah, we've written our response on our guest book. But if you're going to come do that and take our challenge, that's basically like you telling us. Are you telling our guests don't listen to the show that night? And
or something. I mean,
that's not cool. So
it's not very courteous, at least.
It's not. At least you gave us the email, we responded, and there you go. There's the Wotu challenge.
It's perfectly fine because we believe in dialogue. That's why I invite the feds to call in every bloody show, and then they never do, but they should, because it's a dialogue happens between multiple parties. If these parties don't seem to get along with each other, well, that could be kind of dangerous for us. But yeah, at the same time, it gives both sides of a story or multiple angles of the same story,
and we want to hear them both.
And
we're not favoring one side over the other.
Of course not. I mean, we encourage this sort of
exchange,
discussion, and forum. You know, I mean, that's basically one of the beauties of what we do. So,
but don't pimp it if you can't bimp it. I made up that word. I'm sorry. Pimp. So I think of, except for gimp.
Scott, that was very eloquent stuff we were saying, and then you throw that.
I know, Well, don't dish it if you can't take it.
Don't pimp it if you can't bimp it.
Yeah, I don't know.
We need to have a T-shirt with that on there. You know that.
That's yes.
That's going to be a future soundbite. I'm sure.
Get your notepad out. Take these notes down and cherish them for all time. We've got a minute left, so I guess we should throw up that outro music.
Yeah, of course.
Might as well.
I mean, but seriously, I'm really excited about talking. I'm excited talking about all of our guests, honestly. I really
anyway, check out our guest book, guys, and you'll see what we're talking about, right? All right, well, that concludes this edition of World of the Unexplained.
It was a fantastic show. Nigel was a great guest. Thanks again.
I'm Jay Scott. You're only JD DJ on the OmniSound Radio 1 network.
I'm Trent Lackey. We're coming to you out of Kernersville, North Carolina. Small town we talk about very big things.
That's right, guys. Have a good night.
See ya.